Hey, what's up, everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be watching Record of Lodoss Wars, the OVA. So the Record of Lodoss Wars OVA is a 1990 anime, and for those of you who don't know, OVA stands for Original Video Animation, and basically it was used to kind of distinguish between animated series that aired on television versus kind of just direct-to-video, if you will, kind of home release. And usually what set them apart, aside from OVAs tending to be some not always, but sometimes shorter in length, was that because it wasn't meant for kind of just, quick, episodic weekly television, usually the animation was of a higher caliber. There was kind of more, and it was kind of like the best of both worlds between animated films, the television. Usually the animation was not quite as good as the film, but still noticeably better than what you would see on television. The OVA, the Record of Lodoss Wars, is considered by many people, myself included, probably one of the best looking animes of all time. And dare I say, and I know this might spark some debate, which I'm saying it's at least up there, but it might be the best looking anime of all time, and if not, top three for sure. The art design, the art style shows a degree of detail in an era where, which is kind of pre-digital, meaning now most anime and most animation in general is done digitally. You draw it digitally, you color it digitally. This is all done by hand. It was lit by hand. It was drawn by hand. So when you're seeing all this painstaking detail, this is literally somebody, drawing it. But basically, the story is kind of a classic swords and sorcery story, kind of very much in the same vein of like Tolkien's like Lord of the Rings or Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing, where it's just this fantasy world where you have multiple races of like humans and elves, dragons of that sort. And it's basically a time of strife, a time of conflict. Kingdoms are at war. Basically, dark forces are basically trying to create political unrest in the world, if you will. They are trying to pit, kingdoms together, in the hopes of also kind of reviving these dragons, these ancient beasts, to kind of bring about calamity in the world. And it's, in classic, fantasy. In storytelling, you have a band of adventurers, of a wayward group have to kind of go on an adventure, go on a quest to stop it. And it basically follows a young swordsman named Parn and his kind of group of, wayward travelers, if you will, and kind of end up being kind of caught up and consumed when this whole kind of struggle and this whole kind of debacle, if you will. And it's very reminiscent. If any of you guys have played like a lot of like Japanese role playing games like Final Fantasy or Star Ocean or the Tales of ... games like Tales of Vesperia, those kinds of things, you'll kind of know the format. You get a group of people together and you have to go on an adventure that turns into something much larger than you expect it to be, and you end up basically saving the world. But what Record of Lodoss Wars does so well is that it takes what might not necessarily come across as almost like tropey or just kind of cliches, and ends up fleshing out these characters. They are interesting, well thought out characters. You enjoy being with them. You enjoy following them. Even though everything around them is so fantastical and so removed from anything that we would deem as normal, you quickly adhere yourself to this world because they make it feel real. They make it feel tangible. They make it feel normal because for them, it is. And because of that, because you're able to connect so well with these characters, you yourself find it easier to kind of connect with the world. You find yourself kind of accepting and believing things that normally would just seem beyond the veil of reality and possibility, because these characters are so kind of down to earth, if you will. And because of that also, when certain plot elements take place, you kind of feel what they feel because you've already kind of adhered yourself to them. You're, that member of the group now. You're the silent member of the team. So as they go through something, you go through it with them. And that's kind of the mark of a good, I would say, fantasy story, or even science fiction that utilizes a lot of extravagant kind of visuals. Because again, the more big and elaborate fantasy becomes, the more removed it does it also from real life. So because of that, it is important to have characters that the audience can connect to, whether it be readers, viewers, doesn't matter. We need to be able to kind of adhere ourselves to these characters, otherwise we're going to feel left behind, because everything that's happening around them is so much bigger and more elaborate than anything that's happening in our lives, unless your lives are way more awesome than mine. But yeah, it still, though, deals with issues that we can connect with. Political unrest, groups of people who don't trust one another because they look different, they believe in something different. It's just now, taking it more literal in the sense of like different races of people, actual different races of people, not just, you're this skin color or you're that skin color. Now it's like, no, you're a different species altogether. And it plays on kind of those prejudices that exist in our world. And in doing so, gives us, the viewer, something to kind of, again, connect with, because we can relate to that. We've seen that. We know what that feels like. We know what that looks like. So even though it's the guys might be a little bit different, now you're dealing with someone with pointy ears, you can still understand the nature behind that kind of ideology, that way people feel, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. It's something recognizable to you, and right away you find yourself then connecting with something in a world that is otherwise completely different from your own. And again, Record of Lodoss Wars does that very, very well. Now, this is a big, big franchise, by the way. It's based on a series of role-playing games that have since been turned into multiple animes, not just the OVA, but television animes, films, manga. It's kind of a big ongoing franchise, but the OVA kind of stands for a lot of people as kind of like, the crown jewel in the whole franchise. It's the look of it, like I said. I mean, I don't want to get too hung up on just visual aesthetics, because obviously a good story needs to look more than just, pretty. It needs to have substance too, which it does. But when you look at it, when I try, and people ask, why do you like anime? Like what, or especially, or even better yet, when I talk with younger anime fans, and they ask me, why are you so hung up on like the old stuff? It's like, and I'm not saying any of the new stuff is bad. I also have my preferences, and people say, well, why do you think old anime is so much better? And granted, Record of Lodoss Wars might be a bit of an unfair example, because it was amazing even by the standards of the day. That's not like everything came out in 1989, 1990, early 90s looked like that. But still, it feels like something like that would have only come out like then. When you look at the fact that it was done in a time where everything had to be done kind of in an analog way, you realize the time and energy that went into it to make it look that good is incredible. And because of that, it has stood the test of time. It, in fact, looks better than a lot of what's coming out even right now. Which is one of the reasons why, too, I always kind of recommend this one for each, especially if people are into like fantasy. If you're into like Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing, but you're not really familiar with anime, I always say, well, check out Record of Lodoss Wars. It's one of those anime titles that transcends the medium it's in. It's kind of like when we talked about Tekken Man Blade, saying that, even if you're not really into anime, that's a good one to get into, because it's more than just the medium it's in. It's something that can speak to all different kinds of audiences of all different kinds of taste, whether you're into anime or not. And Record of Lodoss Wars is kind of the fantasy version of that. Even if you're not into anime or manga or kind of, a lot of, Japanese entertainment, it does transcend it. It can speak to people who maybe normally wouldn't watch this kind of stuff, and maybe would not watch anything else other than that. But I do believe that this is something that they themselves can kind of adhere to, much in the same way I felt Tekken Man could do that. And like I say, it just looks gorgeous. Or even if you're just a fan of animation, whether it's Eastern, Western, doesn't matter. You can look at this and appreciate it just for an animated aesthetic. But like I said, the story is very interesting, very involved. The characters are a lot of fun, and just interesting people. And you find yourself just wanting to be around them, wanting to follow them, taking an interest in who they are, their lives, and kind of how they feel about everything that's happening to them and around them. So with that said, I recommend the original Record of Lodoss Wars OVA. Like I said, there are other animated titles that fit into this this franchise, which are good, and some of which we'll probably end up even talking about on this show. But the OVA, the original video animation, stands, for me anyway, and I know for a lot of people, that's kind of like the benchmark. This is one of those classic anime titles that has stood the test of time, because it's just, A, it looks incredible, and B, it's just a well-crafted narrative. So, with the Record of Lodoss Wars OVA, Have you seen it? If so, what did you think? If not, are you going to check it out now? And if you do, come back, leave me some comments below. Let me know what you think. Again, I'll leave some links in the description section below where you guys can pick it up and check it out for yourselves. So with that, that's going to do it, folks. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace!